Hey guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be talking about alto saxophone mouthpieces. I'm going to address the question of which alto saxophone mouthpiece should I use. I'm going to show you guys the 4 mouthpieces that I currently own. There's a lot to consider when you're trying to decide which mouthpiece to use for your alto saxophone. I would say maybe one of the main questions is, what sound are you trying to get out of your sax? Also, what tone are you looking for? Are you looking for a brighter tone or are you looking for a darker tone? Also, another thing to consider is, what is your level of experience? Are you just starting out learning the saxophone? Are you a student? Or are you an intermediate player? You've got a few years under your belt. Maybe you're in high school, college. Or are you an advanced player and you've been playing for many years? So these are things to think about when going out to purchase a new alto saxophone mouthpiece. You also want to consider, what type of reed are you going to use with your mouthpiece? What reed strength are you going to use? If you haven't already, please go watch the video that I recently posted about which reed strength to use. I will post it right here so that you can easily click on it, as well as put a link in my description so that you can watch that video. But yes, you want to also consider the reed strength. For example, if you are starting out learning the saxophone or you're a student, and you get a alto saxophone mouthpiece with a smaller tip opening because it's going to be easier to play, you're probably going to be starting out on a lighter reed strength, such as a 2 or 2.5 strength. Whereas if you're more of an intermediate or advanced player, you might be looking for a different sound or trying to get more volume out of your instrument, so you might be playing on like a 3 or 3.5 or 4. That being said, there's many professional players that have a mouthpiece with a wider tip opening because they have enough embouchure strength and enough breath strength to be able to handle that big of a tip opening on a mouthpiece. And because it's a tip opening, sometimes it allows them to go down to a lower strength reed, such as a 2, 2.5, or 3. There are a few different components to an alto saxophone mouthpiece. 1, the tip size. Number 2, the chamber. Number 3, the baffle, and number 4, the facing curve. I'm going to share another video soon to go into depth on what each component means for you as a saxophone player and what each component offers as far as the sound of the mouthpiece in relation to your instrument. But for now, I will go ahead and briefly go over a little bit about each component of the mouthpiece. Here's an example of an alto saxophone mouthpiece. This mouthpiece is the stock mouthpiece that came with my P.Mauriat saxophone that I recently got a couple months ago. If you haven't watched that video about the unboxing or 2-month recap videos, I'll go ahead and put those right there so that you can click on them, as well as links in the description. But yeah, this is the mouthpiece that came with my saxophone. Okay, so the tip opening of the mouthpiece is going to be this area right here on the very tip where it opens. So some mouthpieces have a small tip opening. Some mouthpieces are going to have a big tip opening. So the tip size is going to be the distance from the very tip of your mouthpiece to the reed right here. So many mouthpiece manufacturers make different tip sizes for their mouthpieces. They might make several, 5 or 6 or 7 different mouthpieces with different tip sizes. Typically, the smaller model number of a mouthpiece is going to represent a smaller tip opening, and a larger model number is going to represent a larger tip opening. In general, your smaller tip mouthpieces are going to be for students or people that are just starting out learning the saxophone. They're going to be easier to blow, easier to play. Also, your larger size tip openings are going to be harder to play, harder to blow. They're not going to be meant for students or people that are learning the saxophone. They're going to be meant for your intermediate or advanced level players. But the advantage of those is they're going to give you a little more flexibility with the sound of your instrument. Then here is going to be the baffle of the mouthpiece. The baffle is the section of the mouthpiece that is right behind the tip rail. It's the very first thing that your sound wave hits when you're playing your saxophone. So for that reason, it has the largest impact on your sound. So again, the baffle is this section right here of the mouthpiece. The next component of the mouthpiece is going to be the chamber. The chamber is the big section inside the mouthpiece. Might be kind of hard to see on the camera, but it's inside. And the chamber is going to determine the type of sound as far as how full or condensed your sound is. So whether it's like a full resonant sound or more of a focused, condensed sound, it's going to have an impact on that for your saxophone. While there are a few other components of the alto saxophone mouthpiece, the last one that I want to talk about is the facing curve. The facing curve, if you can see right here, this is the table of the mouthpiece right here. This is the table, and the facing curve is going to be this curvature right here that opens up into the tip right here. And so there's a breaking point or a break point at some point where it breaks from the table and curves up to the tip opening. And so right here on the mouthpiece, this is going to be the facing curve right here. So different mouthpieces are going to have different degrees of this curve, and they're going to have different sizes of when it breaks from the table. This is the mouthpiece that I typically use 99% of the time, pretty much all the time. It's a JodyJazz HR Custom Dark model number 5. And as I said earlier, different manufacturers are going to make the same mouthpiece, but with different tip sizes and probably different facing curves on there as well. This one goes from, I believe, model number 4 through maybe like 7 or 8, something like that. But there's several different models with varying tip openings. This is model number 5 that I play on. JodyJazz starts out with a model number 4. So the one I play on doesn't have the smallest tip opening. So with this mouthpiece, I usually play on a Van Doren double Z strength number 3 reed, or sometimes a traditional blue box 3.5, just depending on the tone or the sound I'm trying to get from my instrument. The other mouthpiece that I own, that I very seldom play now, but I used to play a lot, is my Brilhart Ebolin alto saxophone mouthpiece. And this is what this looks like. The tip opening on this is a little bigger. So typically on this mouthpiece, I'm going to want to use a reed strength such as like a 2.5 or 3, just because this mouthpiece is going to be a little bit harder for me to blow in and produce sound. The last mouthpiece that I currently own is the stock mouthpiece that came with my Cannonball Scepter alto saxophone. And here is the Cannonball mouthpiece. Another mouthpiece that I recently tried out but didn't really like for the tone that I'm trying to get from my saxophone was a Claude Lakey hard rubber mouthpiece. For me personally, the tone that I like to get from my saxophone is more of a warmer, dark, sort of vintage sound. So for me, the JodyJazz mouthpiece was just what I needed for that tone and for that sound, as well as my P.Mauriat PMXA-67RX alto saxophone with the dark vintage lacquer. I'm going to go ahead and put these different mouthpieces on my alto saxophone so that you can hear the different tonal qualities of each one and hear for yourself if you might like one over the other, and maybe it'll help you with your search for the perfect mouthpiece. For each mouthpiece, I'm going to use a Van Doren double Z strength number 3 reed, as well as a hard rubber Rovner ligature. Stay tuned.